Imagine you're a guest walking around an amusement park and want to ride something. You're immediately going to run into the problem of what do you do with all your stuff? Guests need to store things like phones, backpacks, and even those overly large stuffed animals in order to ride. It can be really annoying to guests when an amusement park has different rules and policies for each ride and give an inconsistent experience. Additionally, phones have become quite a hot topic around amusement parks. Cell phone use is banned on most rides, and some rides won't even allow phones in the rider's pocket. As much as it sucks, it's a very good rule, as a phone becoming loose during a ride can be very dangerous. So, what systems do amusement parks have in place for storing loose articles? Stick around, because I'm going to answer that question, and at the end, I have a never-before-seen patent from Universal for a revolutionary storage method. Doesn't that just sound exciting? The most common type of storage are bins and cubbies. These are a box or shelf inside the station for you to place things in. Ideally, there will be a designated bin for each train so that while you're away from the station, your train's bin can be locked. However, not all parks go this extra mile to lock the bins. Bins are great because they're cheap, can fit almost anything inside of them, and are intuitive for guests to use. The downside of the bins are that they majorly slow down operations. This is not only caused by the fact that guests have to cross over the train to get to the bin and then walk back to the train, but also that those wanting to store their stuff have to wait on the previous riders to retrieve their stuff. That might not sound like a long time, but just shaving 2 seconds off of each dispatch could allow an extra 200 people to experience that attraction that day. Also, some guests are paranoid to leave expensive things like wallets in a bin, even if the bin gets locked. Additionally, sometimes a guest waiting in line will see the guest in front of them go through the gate and cross over the train and assume they must not be riding. So the guest enters and takes a seat. Then the original person comes back, and now you've got an awkward situation where someone's in your seat. Also, for some reason when a ride has bins, some guests see that as an opportunity to put your stuff anywhere, which infuriates me. And it infuriates them when I take their stuff and put it in the proper place so I don't trip over it. Finally, bins don't work on every ride. Take Millennium Force, for example. You enter the ride in one station and exit in another. For there to be bins on that ride, you would somehow have to move the bins. As far as I know, moving bins only exist on one ride, and it's not even a ride with a separate load and unload station. At Yukon Striker in Canada's Wonderland, while guests are waiting in line, they place their belongings on a suspended rack that looks like one of those dry cleaner conveyors. While guests are on the ride, the rack starts moving overhead towards the exit, where it will be waiting for the guests at the exit of the attraction. This has the benefit of removing congestion, as the people gathering their belongings and the people storing them away aren't in the same location. Additionally, it speeds up operations by having all handling of loose articles happen outside of the ride area. So, when you go to board the ride, all you have to do is sit down and pull down your harness. Some downsides are that drinks are not allowed, as they will spill. Additionally, this is a much more expensive system. It could also lead to increased downtime for the ride if the conveyor mechanism were to break. And wouldn't that be annoying if you don't get to ride something because the bins are broken? The next and probably most hated system is lockers. Lockers are a designated space for each guest to store their stuff in a secure way. There's 2 types of locker systems. I'm going to refer to them as inside the queue and outside the queue. Outside the queue lockers are the most common. These are lockers located near the entrance of the attraction. Oftentimes, these lockers cost an extra fee to use. Depending on the ride's requirements, guests may need to store items in these lockers and see it as a forced extra charge. Some rides are stricter and don't allow phones on the ride. In that case, the lockers are usually free. However, the guests will have to leave their phone in the locker and potentially be hours without it in line. How do parks ensure that you don't have your phone on you? Well, metal detectors, of course. That's right. Who doesn't love going through TSA just to ride a roller coaster? This is where inside the queue lockers come in. Right before the station is an area to place your belongings in a locker. Then you go through TSA. And you learn you can't bring your wallet either. So you go back to the locker. And then you go through TSA again. It's almost like when they said take everything out of your pockets, they meant take everything out of your pockets. Now, these in-queue lockers can confuse guests because they don't understand how to get their stuff back without waiting in line again. Well, let me tell you a secret. The lockers are double-sided. So after exiting the ride, you can access the same locker from the other side. And yes, some guests will be upset that their items have been moved. Yeah. Despite everything I mentioned, lockers do have some downsides, such as large things may not fit inside of them. They also take up a lot of space and look ugly. I mean, does this really make you feel immersed in the Hulk? It's easily possible for a major roller coaster to have over 1,000 people waiting in line, so there needs to be enough lockers to handle those 1,000 people plus extra for wiggle room. Lastly, if someone has medical supplies like an EpiPen or insulin, then they need that with them at all times. Exceptions are often made for these people to take their backpack in line with them, defeating the whole purpose of the lockers in the first place. A relatively new strategy is to have on-ride storage. When you board the train, there is a little place to store your belongings on the ride with you. I know of only 2 instances of this, which are Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point and Tron at the Magic Kingdom. In both cases, they're used to prevent phones from falling out of the ride. Steel Vengeance features a pouch with a zipper, and man, did those like to jam and not work great. This majorly slowed down operations and did not last long. However, Tron features a compartment similar to a small locker. And just like with bins, you'll have to wait for the previous guest to collect their things before the new people can board. A very rare method of storing loose articles is to have a staff member walk around with a bucket and manually collect everything. This usually happens while guests are getting their seatbelts buckled and harnesses pulled down, so it can slow down operations. However, it only exists at small parks anyways. It does have the potential for a staff member to drop your belongings, but other than that, it's simple and rarely used, and it isn't really worth talking about that much. I do want to note that some rides will combine methods together, such as Valraven at Cedar Point having both lockers outside the ride for large items and bins on the platform that are supposed to only be for shoes, but are usually for anything that guests can fit inside of them. The last storage system I have is the most convenient. It's to simply store everything on the ride with you. Not to be confused with the on-ride storage mentioned earlier, which were only for phones. Most rides are not capable of doing this. However, Wild Mouse at Cedar Point, a fairly new roller coaster, does allow you to hold your backpack between your legs while you ride, which makes me hopeful that in the future more attractions will allow for this on-ride storage. But there is one more method. In 2017, Universal patented a ride storage system that has yet to be used on a ride. Picture this. You are waiting in line for a roller coaster. Shortly before the station, there's a bunch of pouches you can pick up. Kind of like when a ride has 3D glasses and you just grab one and move on. With this pouch, you can store your phone, keys, wallet, and maybe even glasses. Once you seal the pouch closed, it locks, and you can't access anything inside of it. You continue waiting in line. When you board, the ride has a carabiner in front of each seat, and you simply clip the pouch to the carabiner. After the ride is over, you take the pouch with you, and mind you, it's still locked. As you walk out of the exit gate, a wireless RFID signal is sent to the pouch, unlocking it and giving access to everything inside. You take the stuff out of the pouch and leave the pouch in a designated location. There may even be a detector beyond that area to scan for anyone trying to take the pouch outside of the ride area. Since this idea has never actually been implemented, it could look totally different in reality. Like maybe, instead of a pouch, you get a box. Or maybe the park provides you with, let's call it a secondary phone case that your phone fits into. This could allow you to attach your phone to the ride vehicle, like maybe to the seat in front of you. Then, the park could encourage guests to set their phone to record themselves on the ride. Wouldn't that be crazy? Recording on rides has been a big no-no for a long time, but with a system like this, it could be encouraged. Unfortunately, there is no perfect solution. It becomes a tricky balance of safety, cost, throughput, and the guest experience. It would be nice if parks were consistent and every ride used the same storage method. However, that would mean using whatever the strictest rides rules are, and I don't think you or the park wants to put your phone in a locker and have to go through TSA for every ride. It seems like bad storage systems have been one of the biggest complaints at parks, and the parks are putting more effort and money into consistent and visible systems. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.